I'm Hemant Mehta.
This is Jessica Blimke.
And you're listening to the podcast for FriendlyAtheist.com.
Today we're joined by Conor Robinson, who graduated from Yale University, where he launched the Yale Humanist Society. He's a Teach for America alumnus, and last year he began and took part in the Pathfinders project. This is basically a year of humanist service. Consider it a mission trip minus the religion. He visited Cambodia, Uganda, Ghana, and Haiti, among other places.
And full disclosure, I'm on the board of the Foundation Beyond Belief, which helped sponsor the Pathfinders project.
So he's way biased.
So I am a little biased, but you know what? It doesn't matter because what Conor did is pretty amazing.
Yep.
So Conor, tell us about the Pathfinders project for anyone who doesn't know what it is. How did it get started and what did you end up doing?
Well, yeah, I mean, it got started in my garage, so to speak. I initially wanted to travel, but knew that I wanted my travel to be more meaningful than just a tourist visiting the site. And for me, that meant interacting with people on a basis other than tourism. But I knew as well that there was no way to do that by just showing up in a country and saying, even as genuinely as I might have said it, tell me all about your life. So I thought about how I might go about doing that, and I drew upon my experience as an interfaith activist and someone who had used service in order to build community through the Humanist Society at Yale. And I struck upon the idea of using service as a foundation for building trust really just a sense of trust before trying to get a better sense for people's lives and have more meaningful conversations with them.
Did you know
where it all started?
Did you know where you were going to go before you went through all this plan, or did you ever make any decisions about where you may travel on the spot while you were already abroad, or was all that planned out in advance?
But we did plan it out in advance, but we didn't set the itinerary based on, just my personal whim. Hey, I want to go here, I want to go there. Once I determined that service was really going to be the key for me, then our selection of excellent groups with which we would volunteer really ended up determining our itinerary because we picked the groups first.
Yeah, and it's not like you're going to the Bahamas and like the coast of France or anything like that. You're going to places that really need help.
Yeah, no, these were all definitely third world countries with major human rights, environmental, clean water and sanitation issues. And with regard to the other aspect of your question, there wasn't a whole lot of spontaneity or flexibility because we had to really commit to these organizations. We were picking organizations that were doing excellent work, and organizations that do really good work don't necessarily need short-term volunteers usually. They need people who are willing to commit at least a month of time.
So what kind of challenges did you face while you were overseas? I remember I met you shortly before you were leaving, and you were formerly a vegan, right? And you kind of backtracked on that just so you could be more comfortable. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, well, so I was raised vegetarian, and I had been vegan for 4 years before really committing to this idea of Pathfinders project. And I decided to prepare myself by going omnivore for the year before Pathfinders and then for the year of Pathfinders. It wasn't as much about wanting to make the trip easier as it was about being committed to this idea of cultural exchange and wanting to participate fully. I knew that I wouldn't be able to be a gracious guest in people's homes if I was, being nitpicky about what they were serving. And also I recognized that food is an incredibly integral part of culture, and so I wanted to be able to partake in that fully. So food actually wasn't, you'd think it might have been very difficult for me, but I ended up being one of the, most voracious and widely ranging eaters out of the group. But it did end up being a concern for some of the other travelers. Other difficulties, one of our volunteers got malaria.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, we definitely also had some stomach bugs that we all came down with at one time or another. The language barriers, of course, always played a role, but I see that more as a source of entertainment than difficulty. I think you have to carry a sense of whimsy with you if you're going to get through the challenges on a trip like this.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back for a second, though. Take me back to the vegetarian thing, because like you, I was raised vegetarian. I have still never purposely eaten like meat in my life. I'm sure I've accidentally had some or something. But if you're saying you're an omnivore like a year before you go on this trip, and you're about to go to these other countries where you're probably not just eating meat, but eating meat no one has eaten before, does that mess with your head, much less your body?
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot. I've heard horror stories from people who, even ones who weren't raised vegetarian, but they go vegetarian for a while and then they go back to meat, who just have major stomach problems. Fortunately, that wasn't an issue for me. The psychological component may have come more into play. I mean, for me, I still have a little bit of trouble when, it's not just meat, but it's like meat on the bone with connective tissue and other, a bunch of different textures. So yeah, that definitely, there were definitely times where we encountered things from animals that we couldn't identify, and we looked at each other. Like there was a hot pot that we had in Cambodia that definitely had like congealed blood in it. And,
delicious, I'm sure. Somewhere.
We had some really interesting fish balls that definitely were the entire fish, just sort of like chopped up, everything included, and then mushed together.
You were on a reality show without the cameras.
Exactly.
What other challenges, besides the food, what other big challenges did you all face overseas?
Besides the malaria.
Yeah, there were, I would say, gender dynamics ended up, and the difficulties that we encountered, or the difficulties we observed women facing in other countries, and really our lack of power to do anything about that aside from just discuss them when discuss the gender dynamics when we had that foundation of trust built up with everyone. I'd say that was a little trying for us, though of course it wasn't nearly as trying for us as it was for the women that we were observing.
Sure.
I would say there were a lot of lessons learned about group dynamics for us. I mean, we were 4 people who'd never met each other before and who spent every waking minute together and in challenging times. So that definitely posed its own, I wouldn't say problems, but it taught us lessons for the Humanist Service Corps, for sure.
Well, I think anyone who's in a relationship that ends up living together, when you're around someone for that long, it's like a sibling relationship where, yeah, you love each other, but you're fighting all the time too. That happens.
Sometimes you just want to be away from people. Like, go away. And especially if you're in a place where you can't just, like, go to a restaurant nearby and, like, have some alone time or, like, go meet other people.
Yeah.
These are not just
you're stuck with these people.
Yeah, not just the people
better
you're
or
living
for worse.
with, but the only people who speak your language
right.
in like 100-mile radius. That's got to be tough.
Exactly. And even if you're in a relationship with someone, even if you're cohabitating with someone, you both have your own job. You both there are times where you have your own space, but with our group, our work was together, our meals were together, we slept in the same room. The bathroom privacy in some places was just not existent, so we were essentially bathing together. There's really no point at which we had our own space in some of these countries we were in. So yeah, it was definitely a trial.
Do you guys, the people who went on the Pathfinders trip, are you all still keeping in touch now that you're back in the U.S.?
Yeah, for the most part. I was in Atlanta with Ben Blanchard for Dragon Con. We tabled together, and in October I'll be speaking alongside Wendy Weber at the Yale Humanist community. So we're definitely still bumping into each other, and we're still in touch on Facebook and via email.
But not bathing together anymore?
Not bathing together anymore. No, that has come to an end, fortunately.
Okay.
Maybe once for old time's sake, but not every day.
That'll be the reunion.
There you go. Now, you guys call this like a humanist service project. I wonder if, how did humanism play a role in this? It's not like you were going to these countries and preaching the gospel of atheism. It's not like you were preaching that you guys all have to be humanists. So where did that come into play? Just through your actions?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, this wasn't about proselytizing. This wasn't about preaching atheism, and it certainly wasn't about deconverting anyone. To the extent that we had any sort of agenda that might be on that sort of missionary spectrum, it was only that we hoped, as a byproduct of our efforts, that people might soften their image of atheists. But that certainly wasn't a primary goal. So how did humanism come into play? Well, it was interesting. Some of the projects in which we were partnered with explicitly humanist organizations, we actually found ourselves playing almost the role of comparative religious educators, or of really sort of downplaying our own humanism. For example, we taught in a couple of humanist schools where, to us, some of the educational efforts actually seemed a little bit more stridently pedantic. There was a little bit of an effort to teach humanism, and so we actually found ourselves playing up our interest in other people's beliefs and playing up our interest in interfaith work and serving as I mentioned, educators about the value of comparative religious education. You know, why it makes sense to seek to understand other people first, which is what our entire mission was. Seek to understand before you seek to teach about what it is that you actually believe. Mm-hmm. So that was an interesting and unexpected interaction, you know, sort of with our own humanism and with the understanding of humanism that we discovered abroad. The other way it came into play was in the ways that we saw other people recognizing their own values in our actions. So one really cool thing that happened, for example, was in Cambodia, where even though English is only spoken in a very limited way, we had people recognizing things we were doing as being, or as expressions of a particular Buddhist value. I'm blanking on the name all of a sudden. I can remember the name from the Buddhist term, but I can't remember the translation in English.
That's all right. What's the Buddhist term?
It's metta.
Excellent.
That's ironic.
It works.
No, okay. So it's loving kindness. It just occurred to me. So
that can't be right.
We had, on more than one occasion, we had someone see something we did, and obviously we weren't doing it because we thought we'd be recognized, but we had someone saw something we did and then say, "Hey, loving kindness," and that's exactly how I would describe my own attempts at humanism. So it was really gratifying and validating to hear that expressed in another person's language. I mean, that's their vernacular. I wouldn't have used those words before, but as soon as they used those words, it seemed apt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you all are planning to do this again, right? I don't know whether it's all the same 3-4 people again, but are you going to go overseas once again later this year or next year?
Well, yeah, but in a slightly, well, more than slightly, in a different fashion. So the underlying goal, or maybe an overarching goal, I don't know, however you want to think about it, of Pathfinders Project was, in addition to the work we were doing, to scout out a location for the Humanist Service Corps. So we visited 7 countries. We had 10 different projects, so 10 different locations across those 7 countries. And after Pathfinders Project, we settled on one that we'll now be returning to in order to try and launch the first permanent international humanist service program. So in the summer of 2015, we're going to be returning to northern Ghana with a core of hopefully, 4 to 8 volunteers, depending on the funding. And we're going to be working with the women who are accused of witchcraft by their communities and who are expelled from those communities and forced to live in deplorable conditions.
And you're going to focus on that one specific group of people for how long?
Well, I imagine that we will be there for the foreseeable future, because this is a problem that has deep cultural roots. And so what we'd like to do is we'd like to build a model in northern Ghana that is scalable and that can be built elsewhere. But I don't think we're necessarily planning on shifting, our service core from location to location. We'd like to expand, but I imagine we'll be in Ghana for some time, because the work we'll be doing is, A, to improve the living conditions for these women, but B, the ultimate goal would be to decrease the number of women who are exiled from their communities each year until we reach a point where women are no longer exiled and no longer beaten and killed, obviously.
This is one of the things I think I really appreciate about the Pathfinders project. I've criticized, I know I made an Atheist Voice video about this once, but I've criticized some Christians who do mission trips, not just because they proselytize, but because it seems for some people it's more of a photo op than anything long-lasting. So they go there, they do a little bit of good work, they take their photos, they hand out the Bibles, they take some photos, they come back home and they never think about that place again. And Conor, what you're saying is it's not enough that we visited these places. We want to go back, we want to set up something long-term. And it's not about, like we said, it's not about advocating atheism. It's about saying these are good people who need help. And the people around them need a little bit of rational thinking to realize that, no, this is not witchcraft that's the problem here.
Right, exactly. It's not witchcraft that's the problem. And I think, I agree with you 100%. This is an education issue in Ghana. But one of the reasons why I really, I feel very strongly about this particular location as the starting point is because I also think it's a teaching moment for our movement. It's a teaching moment for skeptics, atheists, humanists, and agnostics. Because for many people, when I talk about the camps for alleged witches, the first reaction is, well, this is superstition gone wrong. We need to fight the superstition. And although I agree with that reaction, I am very wary of it because I think for a lot of people, it implies that we can fight superstition head on, which is something that I would actually argue against, just based on, the way our brains work. I think that this is actually more of a development issue than an argumentation issue. We're not going to solve the superstition by trying to tell people that they're wrong. We're going to solve this issue by making sure that there's access to proper health care, education, etc. Because the fact of the matter is, there's only 1 out of 10 regions in Ghana where these accusations happen. And it happens to be the least developed, most under-resourced region in Ghana. And that's not an accident. That's not a coincidence.
So, Conor, if somebody wanted, you said you're doing something summer of 2015?
Yeah.
So if, say, somebody wanted to leave their job and come join you guys, hypothetically, of course, nobody here would do that. Anyway, how could people come join you? How could people help? What can we do?
Well, in the long term, so looking at summer 2015, anyone who's interested in more information can sign up for updates. We're still working from the Pathfinders Project website, although we are getting our new Humanist Service Corps website up off the ground. But for the time being, that would be pathfindersproject.com/update, and that will get you everything you need to know as it develops, really. In the meantime, I will be traveling, and Wendy and Ben will also be traveling to talk about our Pathfinders project experiences and to answer questions people might have about the philosophy behind the Humanist Service Corps and what specific work we'll be doing. So people can get involved by, getting to a location where we're speaking or finding our talks online and spreading the word that way on Facebook and Twitter. And as far as we're concerned, that advocacy and that word-of-mouth promotion is also very helpful.
Conor, for people who aren't able to go on the service trip or go overseas for that matter, have you learned anything from your work so far that, what can the rest of us do from home? What can the rest of us do who can't go overseas for whatever reason?
Well, yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And I see this work as reinforcing all of the excellent work that the communities in the U.S. or, any home communities are doing. I see it as a way of simply reflecting back an image of service-oriented atheism to humanist atheists and agnostics in the States, because that's unfortunately not an image we see of ourselves very often. It's not how we're represented. I think one of my biggest takeaways about volunteering and service from Pathfinders Project has direct implications for our work at home. And that's that we really need to reframe the way we approach service, I think, or at least the service I've encountered in the States. And that's what I mean precisely is that most of our service projects attempt to address resource imbalances. So whether we're giving meals to the homeless or packaging items to send or to deliver to under-resourced communities, usually we're addressing some sort of resource imbalance where the volunteer is a person of a privilege of some sort, and they find themselves in a position of having the time and the resources that they can donate to people who have less, essentially. And there's a danger in that construction of service, and the danger for the volunteer is that can become a mindset that I have, therefore it's my obligation to sacrifice some of what I have for those who do not. And I'm not saying that volunteering isn't altruistic, but I'm saying that when we approach volunteering with that mindset, we run the risk of seeing the people we are helping as nothing more than their deficit. We end up emphasizing the deficit in their situation rather than looking for ways to leverage what they do have to offer. And I think we should shift the way we approach service, and we should shift the kinds of projects that we create such that when we enter into a community, the project is not about what we bring to the community. The project is about, okay, when we go into this community, what can we help bring out of the community? So that we're helping not just ourselves see the members of the community differently, but maybe we're actually giving the members of the community the chance to see themselves differently for the first time as well, by emphasizing what they have to offer rather than emphasizing what we have to offer.
Is that something you picked up at all when you were doing Teach for America? Because that's a program that kind of places you in schools that probably have a lot of kids who probably, a lot of society, I think, sees them as kids who are in poverty, who don't have a lot of resources. And I would think it's a teacher's job to kind of bring out something different in them. Here's what you do have to offer. Let me make you even better at it. Is there a connection there?
Absolutely. I think a lot of my preliminary ideas for Pathfinders Project came out of my experience as a Teach for America Corps member. And I would go one step further. For me, it wasn't just about being a teacher. It was about being a special education teacher. And approaching children who have special needs with the mindset that you're looking for their strengths and how to leverage their strengths and not focusing on what their special needs are and how to meet those special needs is a critical mind shift for the special educator, because I'm sure you can imagine how easy it would be to enter into the work of special education with the opposite mindset, the deficit-focused mindset. And that can be debilitating for a student, and for any student, not just a student with identified special needs. So yeah, that was definitely something that that came from my experience in the classroom.
Oh, one last question for you, Conor. How has your life changed since you've been back home? I have an intense, sometimes overwhelming appreciation for things that I never did before. A lot of people ask me if I feel guilt being back in America, and I don't know, maybe I should. I think I'm fortunate, though, in that I don't, and that it's simply a sense of appreciation that I have. I live in Los Angeles, so I do spend a lot of time in traffic. But now, instead of getting upset about the traffic, I just appreciate where I am. I'm still trying to come to grips with the fact that every tap, every faucet of water I turn on is clean, safe, and even heated if I want it, water. And that's like, I don't think 95% of Americans understand what a feat of engineering that is, and how uncommon it is if you're talking about the rest of the world. And so just coming back, I still forget to wash my face with hot water most mornings, because that's so foreign to most of the rest of the world. So I think I've been changed pretty significantly in my appreciation for, in America we wouldn't even call them luxuries, but for things that I definitely consider luxuries now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Conor, we're coming up on time. So one more time, can you give us the website where people can reach Pathfinders Project and what they can do when they get there?
Absolutely. So the website is pathfindersproject.com. I think it's a /. I always get them mixed up. What's the usual slash?
It's a /.
It's a regular slash.
Okay. All right, so it's pathfindersproject.com /updates. And you can sign up there, and you'll receive, basically minute by minute, up down to the wire, updates on developments of the Humanist Service Corps, which is coming right up.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Conor. We appreciate your time.
Thanks to the two of you as well.
Thanks, Conor.
You've been listening to the podcast for FriendlyAtheist.com. This episode was taped at Cinnamon Sound Studios in Aurora, Illinois. The music was composed by Brad Chagdis. If you like what you're hearing, please consider making a contribution at patreon.com/Hemant. That's He-Man T. We appreciate your support. I'm Hemant Mehta.
And I'm Jessica Blimke. We hope you'll join us next time.